Chapter 233. 4. Abducted by a mysterious person. The man went walking ahead on his own, choosing not to hear another word the young lady was saying. Qingyu saw that she was being purposely ignored, and thought she might as well give up. But with things quietened down, she suddenly discovered something different about the place. The spirit energy in this place was thick and robust, at least 10 times that of the constellation continent. She blinked her eyes in surprise. She had gone to the Whitefin lands a few years ago, and although the spirit energy had been more than adequate, it was not as abundant as it was here in this place. In the short while since she came awake, she could feel that her powers had increased by quite a bit. Her powers that had been stuck at the Sacred Burial Art's 7th level for quite a long time had started to change, shooting up quickly through the stages in an instant. In just a short while, she had shot from the 7th level's initial stages to the mid-stages peak, almost breaking through into the final stages. The speed her cultivation was growing at was terrifying. Qingyu suddenly seemed to realize something, and the expression on her face was a little stunned for a moment. Was this place the highest realm, the place they called Cloud Heaven? Could she really be that lucky? Qingyu suppressed her shock at that realization as she followed the man in front, unknowingly walking onto a bed of clouds, where grand and majestic palatial temple sat. When she first stepped into the main hall, it made her jump back in shock, for no other reason than the fact that the people in the great hall were dressed uniformly in black robes and white robes, standing respectfully with the bodies ramrod straight on both sides, their faces and bodies hidden within their robes, every single one looking like a dignified statue. They were all standing packed in neat rows, where there was at least 300 of them. That was quite a majestic and awe-inspiring sight. Just as Qingyu was stunned by the sight of so many people in front of her, she heard the cold, unfeeling voice of the man who had led her here. "Aren't you going to pay your respects to the Temple Lord? Temple Lord?" Following the man's gaze, Qingyu could not help but look up to see the person seated high up on the elevated pedestal hidden behind layers of soft translucent silk curtains. The svelte figure of a woman could faintly be seen leaning back languidly, a sight beautiful as a painting. After the man said that to Qingyu, he bowed respectfully to the woman up on the pedestal and reported, "Temple Lord, this is the woman who has not only killed our people, but also snatched the thing that my lord seeks to possess." The woman behind the veil let out a soft laugh, her voice gentle and melodious, exhilarating to hear. "A person from the lower realms? Haha. It looks like there are more and more capable people in the lower realms in the past few years. Raise your head so that I can have a good look at you. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World." Qingyu was already standing at a lower level, and it was making it hard for the woman up there to see her. Hearing the woman's words, Qingyu lifted her head up. But she had just raised her head, and her flawlessly beautiful face had just been imprinted into the eyes of the woman behind the veil, when it immediately caused the woman's eyes to narrow sharply with a glint. Why does this face look so familiar? It looks so much like that person she has seen a countless number of times. But that person had clearly died. Just who is this woman? Chapter 234. 1. Attacked at night. After a long moment of silence, the woman's voice sounded behind the curtains, tinged with an indiscernible emotion. "What is your name? How could there be two people who look so much alike?" Although Qingyu was rather puzzled by the woman's question, she kept a smile on her face as she replied, "Yu Qing." She had always used that name when she had cross-dressed as a man. This woman's got to be kidding. She still did not know whether this woman meant her any harm, but has had her captured for some unknown purpose. She was naturally not going to reveal her real name to her so easily. After she responded with those two characters, Qingyu heard the woman ask, "Which character is the Qing in your name?" Qingyu hesitated for a moment, and then smiled before she opened her mouth to reply, "The Qing that means endearment between spouses." The woman just sighed, as if she did not hear Qingyu's reply. "Is it really all fated to be like this? What about the thing that you took? Hand it over." Qingyu's eyes lowered slightly, as she hid the dark glint flashing within. The expression on her face looked a little confused as she raised her eyes. "What did I take?" Seeing the befuddled look on her face, The man who brought her here to this place stepped in to say in a grave voice, "You're still trying to deny it? That thing that the crimson gold fiery phoenix was guarding. Once the item is taken away, its remnant consciousness would fade away. You were the only other person besides me to go into that mountain cave." "Oh." Hearing that, Qingyu said without missing a beat, "Couldn't you be the one who was coveting that treasure, and have taken it away for yourself? You were reluctant to hand it over. And as I was coincidentally passing by the place, you came up with this plan to find a scapegoat, by pushing the blame entirely onto my head." Suddenly stunned into a daze by Qingyu's unbelievable ability to twist up facts, and to turn the accusation right back onto him, the man was unable to react for a good long while. When he came back to his senses, his entire body trembled visibly as he spat out hatefully, "That's pure and utter nonsense. Absolutely vile and malicious slander. When did I ever take it? You had clearly. Yufan, why did you start to become so hot-headed?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The woman commented in a soft voice, interrupting the man's raging fit. The man immediately hung his head. "I beg for the temple lord to forgive my impudence. Yufan has overreacted. I will naturally believe that you will not do something like that. You are the most loyal disciple of the divine temple, and you will never betray your lord." Yufan's face looked genuinely moved for a moment and he said, "Your loyal servant is grateful for my lord's trust in me." Qingyu stood there listening in to their conversation, and she came to capture an important piece of information. Chapter 234. 2. Attacked at night divine temple? Could it be one of Cloud Heaven's 5 great powers, the Bright Moon Temple? Lu Junyao had once told her that the voodoo grub and emotion-devouring curse he had been afflicted with definitely had something to do with someone from the divine temple, which was filled with a bunch of people skilled in evil and unorthodox methods, devious snakes who liked to employ sly and crafty schemes, all of them hated and repulsive. Although he was not all that good a person himself, he was still a lot more above board than that entire bunch. Although the Bright Moon Temple was seen to not interfere with any of the other powers on the surface, they were always secretly scheming and plotting against the various powers, not giving in a single inch to any of them. They went against the Dark Lands the most, seemingly unhappy to see the might of the Dark Lands being the strongest power, and was always trying to make them crumble. So, has she fallen right into the tiger's den? Take her away. The woman opened her mouth to say, not mentioning anything about wanting her to hand over the item the crimson gold fiery phoenix was guarding anymore. Although Yufan did not really understand it, he was used to obeying orders given to him. So he brought Qingyu back to the place they were at originally. "How do you people intend to deal with me? Are you just going to imprison me here forever for me to await death? I heard you people mention the Divine Temple earlier. Is this place the Bright Moon Temple in Cloud Heaven?" Along the way, Qingyu tried to speak to the man, but Yufan did not respond, not even a single word. But the fact that the young lady was able to guess that they were in the Bright Moon Temple had surprised Yufan. He paused in his steps and then said to her, "Since you know what this place is, then you know that you can forget about ever escaping from here." Qingyu laughed. "I have not thought of escaping, as you people would not kill me after all." You're so certain that you will not die here?" Yufan laughed scornfully. "Did you not notice just now, when that temple lord of yours saw me earlier, she lost her composure a little? From that, you can tell that there must be more to the story, and that I look very much like a person she knew." Qingyu had analyzed it properly. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. But it must be said that Qingyu's intuition could be terrifyingly accurate at times. Hearing Qingyu's words, Yufan merely took it as a bunch of senseless ramblings, and did not take it to heart. He brought her to the place they had been at earlier, and immediately left with moody face. Qingyu watched him leave in speechlessness. She had merely unintentionally struck the nail right on its head, didn't she? But did he have to hold it against her, and show her a face like she owed him several million taels of gold? She shrugged her shoulders helplessly. Qingyu then probingly touched the cloud she had laid on before. It was soft and fluffy, rather nice to touch. She then tried pushing her hand down on it a few times. Chapter 234. 3. Attacked at night. A firm and solid cloud? No wonder one would not fall through it. She sat cross-legged upon the cloud, as she toyed with a soft corner with one hand. She was here in cloud heaven, and she wondered if she was a far distance away from that fellow Lu Junyao. As that thought ran through her mind, her hand subconsciously took out the purple crystal orb the man had given to her. She tried imbuing the orb with her spirit powers to sense him, but unexpectedly, she did not get any response at all, like her powers had been a pebble thrown into the ocean, unable to stir up even a ripple. A corner of Qing Yu's lips twitched. What is happening? Would being in a different location need her to probe with her powers in a different way? Or has it been blocked? Just the thought of that is so depressing. Temple Lord, are we going to leave that young lady from the lower realms like this? A white-robed old man asked respectfully. The woman behind the curtains affirmed. Of what use would keeping that young lady be to us? To turn her into a puppet? A black-robed old man on the other side asked in puzzlement. I cannot really see anything all that special in that young lady. The woman sighed slightly, and it was quite a long while before she asked in a soft voice. Doesn't any one of you feel that she looks very much like a certain person? Once those words came out, without knowing why, everyone subconsciously thought of a particular person. But that person was the goddess in the divine temple most favored by God back then, and the most highly gifted one, endlessly envied by everyone. It was clear that she should have inherited the divine temple's highest position, but just as the grand succession ceremony was about to begin, that person had mysteriously gone missing. Over a few hundred years since then, no one has heard anything about that goddess. But whenever that goddess was mentioned, not to mention just the Bright Moon Temple, the entire cloud heaven would have heard of her. She wasn't only the most highly gifted goddess in the history of the divine temple, who was highly revered. She also had a mysterious and powerful might backing her up from behind. So what really happened back then? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU on the other side, Lu Ji had also reached the Dark Lands. She had fortunately progressed quite a ways in cultivation the past few years, so besides a slightly pale face, she had not suffered much in the way of injuries, merely carrying a forbidding and chilly air throughout the journey. She was originally already a frostily aloof beauty all this time, and seeing her carry a dark and gloomy face now only made her even more unapproachable. People from the dark lands she met along the way had greeted her, but were all met with complete disregard, her steps moving extremely fast, carrying her past them like the wind. The people of the dark lands were left scratching their heads. What could have happened? Why is she in such a frantic rush? Although Lu Ji's attitude towards them had never been all that friendly all this time, but she would usually at least nod in acknowledgement to them, or respond with a few short words. Seeing her in such a mad rush today was a first for them, and they thought that it was rather strange. Chapter 234. 4. Attacked at night. My lord, Lu Ji has failed in my duty, and allowed something to happen to Miss Qing. I ask for my lord to mete out punishment. In the dim and dark-colored main hall, besides the man seated upon the throne, Bai Ji Yan, Sun Luo, Mei Ji, Little Monster and the bookish and scholarly-looking man were seated on the sides. Lu Ji was kneeling in the middle of the hall. Her head hung very low. Lu Junyao had always been very lenient with his subordinates, and was not someone who bothered much with empty formalities, not to mention making his subordinates kneel here and there every time they came to make a report, which was just tiring to see. So he had waived all of them of a need for such piddling details. For so many years, this was the first time that the proud and haughty Lu Ji was seen to look so servile. The man on the throne did not say anything, and it was Bai Ji Yan who spoke up in a bluster. What has happened to that lass again? Has she gotten herself hurt again? How long has it only been and she was abducted? Lu Ji's voice was tinged with a faint hoarseness. The person seems to be from Cloud Heaven, but I do not know which one of the 5 powers he is from. From Cloud Heaven? Bai Ji Yan raised an eyebrow in surprise. Where did she get taken away? In the faint mist sect's forbidden grounds. Lu Ji replied with a sharp glint in her eyes. That is rather interesting. To think that someone from cloud heaven would go all the way down to the lower realms. What could they have gone there for? Bai Ziyan asked as he looked up at the man seated high up on the pedestal, who had not said a single word. And you do not seem to be anxious at all. Lu Junyao had his chin propped up in one hand, and his other hand was resting upon the eyeless snake on the chair's arm, his fingers tapping lightly. Hearing Bai Ziyan's words, his violet eyes looked up slightly. If she's in cloud heaven, then there is nothing to get anxious about. His tone of voice was not only calm and unworried, but he looked like he had known about this all along. You know where the lass is? Bai Ziyan asked in surprise. Lu Junyao replied indifferently, I will go find her tonight. His gaze swept indifferently over the woman kneeling in the center of the hall. Stand up. Considering the fact that she has not been hurt this time, this lord here will not place any blame onto you. But though I am sparing you from death, you will still have to suffer some form of punishment. Lu Ji lowered her head. I await my lord's instructions. Go to the Black Cliff to receive 12 lashes, and reflect for a month against the wall in solitary confinement before you can come out. Lu Junyao said, I am grateful for my lord's benevolence. Lu Ji said as she retreated back out from the hall. Everyone knew in their hearts that the punishment meted out was light, and nobody was against that. Except for Mei Ji, who piped in to ask, My lord really knows where the lass is now. What do you think? Lu Junyao curved his lips up in a smile, an indiscernible glint in his eyes, which actually looked quite terrifying. Hence when night fell, Bai Ziyan suddenly remembered something that he had to tell Lu Junyao, and he went over to his room to look for him. But he found it to be empty with no one inside. And he recalled what the man had said earlier that day. He has really gone to look for the lass. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, Bright Moon Temple. Lanterns and candle light illuminated the place, and it was silent at this time of the night. Yufan had come here once that night to deliver food. Although he had looked like he still wasn't happy to see her, Qingyu was not too bothered about it. She had naturally not touched a single bite of the food, as she would not want to be suddenly afflicted by some strange voodoo. Seated upon a soft fluffy cloud with her eyes closed, she was just about to take full advantage of the thick and robust spirit energy in the air of this place, when she suddenly detected the aura of another person. It had sprouted out of nowhere all of a sudden, and huddled under a cape. It was lunging straight towards her. Chapter 235. 1. Little Demoness. Really want to eat you up. The figure that was lunging straight towards her at great speed caused Qingyu's eyes to narrow, and the hand supporting her body's weight against the cloud beneath her quickly pushed her up, as she swept a long slender leg out in a powerful whirlwind kick, aimed right at the fast-approaching figure. Sneaking his way in here in the middle of the night, and was trying to spring a surprise attack on her. A lecher. Mask your face, won't you? Then I pummel your face, so hard you will be ashamed of ever showing your face to anyone. The opponent was however calm and composed, not showing the slightest sign of panic. Upon seeing the young lady's foot was aimed right at his head in a vicious sweeping kick, his eyes that were hidden under the darkness seemed to flash with an almost imperceptible mirthful glint, before he caught the young lady's ankle in his hand. With a slightly forceful tug, he pulled her forward straight towards himself. If she allowed him to pull her over like that, she knew that she would end up in a highly awkward position, falling right onto the man's body. Qingyu scoffed coldly, and her entire body flipped in the air, as she swung her other leg in another sweeping kick. Catching that one moment that the man would have no choice but to release his grip on her ankle, she raised her free hand up slightly, and several gold needles shot out towards the man. Her needles were made from a special material, exceptionally tough and strong. Thrown out with internal strength, they were able to pierce through armor, and a person could easily be turned into a sieve with her needles. But before Qingyu could finish that gleeful thought in her mind, the next thing that happened right in front of her eyes in the very next instant caused her to stare incredulously in open-mouthed shock. Her golden needles were finer than cow hair, and they were flying at incredible speed through the air. Not to mention when it was under the darkness of night, one would not be able to see them clearly even in the light of day. That person was not only able to perfectly dodge every single one of those golden needles, shooting at him from all kinds of impossible angles. He managed to render them all harmless and kept them properly into his sleeve. Qingyu remained silent as a vein throbbed on one side of her temple. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, absolutely maniacal. It was while she was still in that stunned daze that the person had come to hold her by her waist and pressed her back down onto the comfortably soft cloud. And before she could even start to throw a fit, the man suddenly pulled the voluminous cape that covered him completely from head to toe right off his body and tossed it aside. What met her eyes was a figure clad in devilishly flamboyant purple, and a pair of violet eyes that looked like they were filled with stars that studded the night skies, that were gazing smilingly at her. Qingyu blinked her eyes, and the expression on her face looked highly befuddled in that one instant. It took her a long while before she was able to react, where she then pulled the man's head down and bit him right on his fair-skinned neck. She bit quite hard, so viciously like she almost wanted to bite off a piece of his flesh. Chapter 235. 2. Little Demoness, really want to eat you up. Lu Junyao let out a soft cry, but did not push her away. His voice sounded a little helpless as he said, "To think that I had been so excited to come look for you. But here you are attempting to murder your beloved the moment we meet. What a heartless little thing you are." Qingyu scoffed coldly and released the man's delicate neck. Upon seeing the reddened bruise with traces of blood still oozing out, she was finally satisfied. Hearing the man's words, Qingyu did not feel the slightest bit guilty, but arched up an eyebrow to look at him. "Who asked you to come sneaking around in the middle of the night to come frighten me? I'm already being merciful by not biting you to death." "Oh, in that case, I'll take it that this is your way of showing how much you miss me then." Lu Junyao nodded his head knowingly. His eyes then flashed with a dark glint before he said, "Then it is now my turn to show you how much I missed you next." "Show how much you missed me?" Qingyu had still not fathomed what his words meant when his handsome face leaned in close to her, and the pressure upon her lips shocked her so much she suddenly forgot to think. While she was still spacing out, the man who was violating her on her lips suddenly opened his mouth slightly and bit her hard on her soft, tender lips. Sensing pain caused her to subconsciously open her mouth. That sly, slippery fella immediately took the chance to slip inside, teasing and taunting, causing the young lady who was frowning in mild anger to blush a peach blossom pink as she gasped for air. After the tangled bout of sentimental kisses, the young lady who had been a little indignant was rather overcome with passion at that moment. "How is it? Are you still angry?" Lu Junyao asked as he gazed at the flushed face in his arms, her lips a little swollen and red, her eyes deep and immersive. The young lady's impassioned look was just too alluring, and he could not help but started thinking to. Qingyu saw the man's devilishly attractive eyes start to grow darkly deep once again, and she quickly stretched her hand out to push away his lips that were bullishly coming in close once again, as she turned her head slightly to the side. Her voice sounded exceptionally alluring because of the raging emotions inside. So seductive it was killing Lu Junyao. "Don't come any closer. You're just like a ravenous wolf." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Her words that sounded like she was complaining caused the man to laugh out loud, but because the young lady's soft hand was clasped over his mouth, the sound came out a little muffled. His warm breath spread over her palm, and it felt a little ticklish. Qingyu pulled her fingers back a little, thinking of putting her arm down, but the man unexpectedly stuck his tongue out mischievously to lick her hand, just as she was moving her hand away. Qingyu's face flushed red in an instant. "Oh, how devilishly seductive." With his beloved clasped softly in his arms, Lu Junyao was feeling satisfied and happy as a lark. His heart was more at ease having the little one at his side after all. However, he had not forgotten to ask about the serious business at hand. He lowered his head and looked at the young lady to ask, "How did you come to attract the eye of the Divine Temple's people? And they actually brought you all the way here?" Chapter 235. 3. Little Demoness, really want to eat you up. I went into the faint mist sect's forbidden grounds, and I heard the roar of a powerful divine beast. The ground suddenly split open after that, and both Lu Ji and I fell underground. It was another world down below, and there was a cave down there, where the remnant consciousness of a divine beast, the crimson gold fiery phoenix, resided. I thought that it was trapped in there, and had wanted to rescue it, never expecting that it was guarding my mother's soul fragment that was inside the cave. Speaking about that, Qingyu's eyes were slightly moist. In the soul-nourishing orb held within the palm of her hand, a frail soul fragment lay quietly. I did not know why that divine beast trusted me so much. Its consciousness dissipated away when it saw me. After I kept my mother's soul fragment safely away, I was careless and was surprised by a sneak attack from a man wrapped in black robes. The next thing I knew, I found myself here in this place when I woke up. Lu Junyao listened in silence, and he came to understand how it all happened. The divine temple had probably detected the crimson gold fiery phoenix's aura, and had gone there seeking to capture it. But they had probably not expected the thing that the divine beast had been guarding was not any heavenly treasure, but just a fragment of Antlan's soul. Lu Junyao laughed softly as he caressed the young lady's face gently. He then opened his mouth to say, "Do you know why it was guarding Antlan's soul, and why it chose to hand it over to you?" Qingyu's brows furrowed together and she shook her head. "I don't know. The crimson gold fiery phoenix was a divine beast Antlan contracted back then, and it shared a very deep and close relationship with Antlan. You carry her blood in you, and your body carries a tinge of her aura. That is why the crimson gold fiery phoenix would naturally trust you." Lu Junyao explained slowly. Qingyu's eyes widened up in surprise. It was Mother's contracted divine beast? Such heaven-defying power. Her mother actually had a divine beast. A divine beast. And it had looked like the divine creature had come from an extremely pure and noble bloodline of phoenixes, of a highly kingly type. Her mother really possessed some great power. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU undisguised astoundment and worship was showing on the young lady's face. Lu Junyao could not help but laugh. That is nothing. Antlan was someone that rocked the entire cloud heaven back then. Merely possessing one divine beast would not be surprising for a person like her. The man's violet eyes surged turbulently for an instant. When the day where the one destined by heaven comes back to life arrives, it will be the day the divine temple's lord and master will change. Let me take you away from here first. Lu Junyao pushed back the emotions rising up inside. He carried the young lady up horizontally in his arms, and was about to leave through a dimensional tunnel. Wait! Qingyu placed her hands on the man's shoulders and looked at him to say, "I am not ready to leave this place just yet." Chapter 235. For, little Demonis, really want to eat you up? Lu Junyao raised his eyebrow up questioningly. Why? This is not a fun place to be in, and you want to remain here? Qingyu curled her lips up in a smile and squirmed out from his embrace. Do you know something? I met the temple lord of the Bright Moon Temple today. She had initially wanted to get rid of me who has been disrespectful to her. But when she saw my face, she actually changed her mind and got her people to take good care of me, decided not to kill me, but also not paying any attention to me. Lu Junyao's eyes narrowed. What are you trying to say? Qingyu's eyes curved up into crescents, shining clear and bright. I must really look very much like my mother, right? The expression on Lu Junyao's face creased up a little. What? You do not need to hide it from me. When I came to this place, I was already able to sense something. Qingyu's lips curved up in a smile and said, I think this temple lord must be old friends with mother. Lu Junyao sighed in helplessness as his large was placed on her head and ruffled the young lady's hair. Why are you so smart? I had originally not wanted you to know that so soon. It's all right. You do not have to tell me. I will find it out for myself. Qingyu replied. Anyway, that woman isn't as harmless as she looks on the surface. If you continue to remain here, I cannot help but be worried. Lu Junyao said with furrowed brows, not agreeing with her decision. The expression on that handsome face was stiff and tight, looking highly displeased. Qingyu smiled and raised herself up on her toes to kiss the man's perfect jawline before blinking her eyes to say mischievously, If you're really so worried, I wouldn't mind having you come sneaking in here every night. It was clearly just a normal suggestion, but it was clear it had changed in meaning in Lu Junyao's ears. The look on his face became a little strange, as he suddenly lowered his head to bite the young lady on the tip on her pointed perky nose in frustration. "You're really such a naughty little one." Qingyu widened her eyes in surprise, and her face looked stunned as she held her reddened nose that had just been bitten. What did she say? In what way has she been naughty? But very soon, the man understood her puzzlement. "If you are going to make me come here every night for a little while like this, I will surely be driven mad by you sooner or later," Lu Junyao said as he pulled the slender young lady into a tight embrace, and his voice then sounded through tightly clenched jaws. "Do you know, I've lived for over 200 years. "I know that." Qingyu nodded her head. She had known that a long time ago, and she had never despised him for that. So what was this fella trying to tell her? "You are the first woman I have ever loved so much. I care a lot about you, and I like having you close to me. Even just embracing you like this, I am finding it hard to hold myself back." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ew, every time I kiss you, I am always thinking, might as well just eat up this tormenting little vixen, as you'll be mine sooner or later anyway. Qingyu felt her face burn, and her heart raced, a feeling she rarely ever felt. This guy, just who is the seductive vixen here? He's always the one whispering sweet nothings endlessly. If not for her strong willpower, most other girls would not be able to withstand it. Moreover, this demon here has such an exceptionally mesmerizing flesh shell, where even she has been inextricably hooked. Qingyu bit her lip, suddenly wanting to win back around. "Then you'd better not come look for me." Chapter 236. 1. Sisters who try to kill each other. This guy's mind is just filled with dirty thoughts, and he's blaming her for it. Hearing the young lady's playfully mocking words, Lu Junyao just could not help but took a nibble of her cheek. "That will not do. You're already here on the same continent with me. How could I possibly bear to leave you all alone in this snake's nest? But since you are so determined to remain here, I must at least come see that you are safe and sound every night to set my heart at ease. But there is one thing you have got to promise me. You must not make any rash moves, as that woman is a lunatic." Lu Junyao reminded a little worriedly when that thought suddenly came to mind. Qingyu's lips pouted and grumbled in a soft voice. "I know what to do. Why does it seem like whenever you're around, I am thought to be a person that is completely helpless and does not know anything at all? Ha, you little fox. You're complaining that I am being concerned about you?" Lu Junyao shook his head. His gaze then turned deep before he continued. "About the communication crystal orb, are you unable to use it now? I was just about to ask you, is there some array or something that isolates any signal or spirit powers from the world outside? I wanted to tell you that I have come to Cloud Heaven earlier, but there wasn't any reaction at all when I infused the crystal orb with spirit power." Qingyu asked him, a look of puzzlement on her face. "You have always been very smart, so it would not be surprising if you are able to guess it." Lu Junyao reached a hand out to caress the young lady's hair, and continued to say slowly, "Within the divine temple grounds, not only is there an array that isolates them from the rest of the world, nobody is able to sense the people's aura in here from outside as well, and most people are not able to set foot in here as well." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Without waiting for the young lady to open her mouth to ask further, he continued to explain. "The Bright Moon Temple flourished for a period of time thousands of years ago, and legend has it that it was where the gods lived. Hence the air of divinity is extraordinarily thick and robust in here. I will assume you have already realized just how intense and abundant the spirit energy in here really is, but you could not possibly have known that many years ago. Any mortal who stayed in the divine temple for a period would be able to extend their lifespans by several decades, as that was when the spirit energy in here was at its purest. Under the brilliant leadership of a wise god back then, the divine temple was the most unshakable power that stood in Cloud Heaven. It was only when the god departed from the world in an accident that the divine temple started to fall into decline, never to return to its old glory." Listening up till that point, Qingyu could not help asking, "This god, how long did he live for?" People in Cloud Heaven all lived past 100 years, and when one manages to make it through to 1,000 years old, their cultivation would advance to a whole different level, their lifespan extended by another 1,000 years at least. But the god, on the very same year that he was to turn 1,000 years old, was found dead in his room. Xingyu's eyes widened. For some unknown reason, a terrifying thought rose up in her mind, and she said reflexively, "Is it possible that the god did not die in an accident, but was actually murdered?" Chapter 236. 2. Sisters who try to kill each other. You're right. Lu Junyao's face was a little grave as he nodded, his eyes gazing upon the young lady's face in his arms. That god had 11 daughters back then, and every one of those 11 goddesses possessed gift and beauty that moved the entire cloud heaven. Among them all, the 11th and 9th princess were most outstanding, and they were the daughters that the god doted upon the most. It was then rumored that the leadership of the divine temple would definitely be inherited by one of those two princesses. But one day, strange misfortune struck the divine temple. The 11 goddesses came down with a strange illness one after another. Even the sect leader of the divine healers did not know what to do, and they ended up departing from the world one by one, until only the two candidates, the 9th princess and the 11th princess, who were the most probable candidates of inheriting the divine temple, were left. From then on, the god naturally came to pamper and dote on the two of them even more, not letting anyone have any chance of hurting those two last daughters of his. Sometime later, the god came to discover the real cause of his daughter's death. It wasn't merely due to accidental misfortune, but it was because someone had secretly learnt the forbidden arts. The divine temple was a place that was the closest to the gods, and anyone who practiced evil forbidden arts that harmed people would see punishment meted onto that person's closest kin. The deeper the person cultivated the forbidden arts, the greater the number of people who will be killed. Investigations finally revealed that the person who practiced the forbidden arts was the 11th princess, the daughter that god doted on the most. In a fit of rage, the god almost beat the 11th princess to her death, and severed their father and daughter ties before kicking her out of the divine temple. Naturally, the divine temple could only be passed down to the 9th princess, the one and only child who was left. The person who practiced the forbidden arts was actually not the 11th princess, but the 9th princess, right? Xingyu was already able to guess the answer after hearing everything that Lu Junyao said. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. That's right. Lu Junyao lowered his head to gaze at the young lady's face before he continued. And the current temple lord of the divine temple now is the very same 9th princess from back then. And if I am not wrong. Xingyu narrowed her eyes, wiping away all emotion in her eyes before she said, "The 11th princess is my mother." Lu Junyao sighed softly. Yes, Aunt Lan was the 11th princess who was thrown out of the divine temple. Xingyu's fingers clenched tightly into fists, her words coming out haltingly with a pause between each word. Aren't the two of them sisters? Why would siblings be seeking to kill each other? Among the 11 goddesses, the 9th princess and the 11th princess were actually the closest to each other, as the two of them grew up together with each other, and they shared everything they had with the other, never having quarreled. But in the end, their relationship slowly changed, as suspicion and animosity festered and grew. Chapter 236. 3. Sisters who try to kill each other, because they came to fall in love with the same man. You would probably have guessed that that man is your father, the chieftain of the barbarian tribe, Mo Jingyu. Lu Junyao curled his lips in disdain as he said scornfully, "That man has always been suave and flirtatious, capturing the hearts of countless ladies, but never remaining fixed to any single one person, until he met Aunt Lan, where he fell completely head over heels. From then on, he fell inextricably in love with her, but Aunt Lan was unmoved by him, not falling for his ways at all. It is always said that nothing can be more precious than having a drifter turn back on his ways, and this must be an example of that. His heart had really been taken with her, and how could Aunt Lan possibly resist his relentless pursuit? In the end, she came to accept him. But at the same time, The ninth princess had also fallen deeply in love with him as well. When she came to find out that the man she loved the most was with the younger sister she was closest with, she was heartbroken. One was the man she loved very much, and the other was her younger sister, so she could not hate or begrudge them. In the end, at the expense of her own dignity and self-respect, she went to beg Mo Jingyu to accept both of the sisters, as she did not minding sharing the same husband with her younger sister. And my father rejected her? Jingyu asked hesitatingly. Lu Junyao laughed aloud. Not only did he reject her, he said some rather nasty words, completely severing any kind of affection she could have hoped for. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ew. Ever since then, the ninth princess changed. She felt that the entire world had turned their back on her, her heart becoming dark and twisted. She began to cultivate maniacally to make herself become powerful, and used forbidden techniques to make her countenance become younger and more beautiful. She felt that she had to be more outstanding than her younger sister, and be more beautiful than her, to make Mo Jingyu look at her in another light. She did become powerful and more beautiful looking, but she lost the kind of pure and untainted innocence she once had, and people around her no longer looked upon her with pure and simple envy, but with fear and terror. The death of their godly father was brought on not only by the punishment dealt out because she practiced forbidden arts, it was mainly because the god came to discover that secret she was hiding, and had ordered for her to be dealt with. By that time, her cultivation had become so powerful that even the god was unable to stand against her, and practicing the forbidden arts had devoured her sensibilities and humanity. In order to not let her godly father expose her secret, she used her forbidden techniques to absorb all her godly father's lifetime of cultivation. In Cloud Heaven, a person's level of cultivation is linked to the length of one's lifespan, so without his cultivation powers, he was as good as dead. That was the real reason for the god's accidental death in the year that he was to turn 1,000 years old. Qingyu remained silent as she listened to the entire story. She was quiet for another moment after that, and then suddenly raised her eyes up to ask, "Between you and her, who would come out superior?" Chapter 236. 4. Sisters who try to kill each other. We have not had the chance to compare before, so I do not know. Lu Junyao said with an eyebrow raised, his eyes shining with a strange glint. But this woman has sent proposal letters to the Dark Lands several times before, and I rejected all of them. Proposal letters? In front of many people, this woman once proclaimed. The man's voice halted in hesitation, suddenly sounding a little coy. Qingyu hummed questioningly, waiting for the man to continue. Lu Junyao coughed softly a couple of times. She said, that I was the type of men she likes. Qingyu almost choked on her own saliva when she heard that. Her shoulders then shook as she tried her hardest to control her mirth and said, "And what was your reply to that?" The gloating expression on her face could not be any more obvious. Lu Junyao glanced scathingly out of the corner of his eyes at the young lady. "What did you expect me to say? Of course I rejected her. That woman is at least 500 years old or more, and she could very well be my mother. Moreover, a woman with such a vicious heart. I will have to say I might not be fortunate enough to live through such a kind of blessing." "Oh." Qingyu nodded her head with a serious face. She then blinked her eyes innocently at him and asked, "But I heard that this temple lord is known to be the greatest beauty in Cloud Heaven. Aren't you moved in the slightest at all?" "TSK. What greatest beauty? She's a far cry compared to Aunt Lan. Who knows how hideously ugly she might turn out to be when she sheds off that beautiful mask on her face that is maintained by evil and dastardly techniques." Lu Junyao scoffed in disgusted contempt. Qingyu merely smiled but did not say anything. Time trickled slowly past, and the dark night was slowly about to welcome the arrival of dawn. Qingyu felt a slight bit sleepy, and the man could not bear to leave so quickly, so he just sat there upon the bed of clouds for a little rest, with the young lady in his arms. But that heartwarming scene did not last for long. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Qing Temple Lord. Who are you? Qingyu had just fallen asleep for a little while, and her mind was still groggy with sleep, when she suddenly heard that angry shout. She was shocked wide awake, and she immediately saw Yufun's angry eyes staring ferociously, his clean and good-looking countenance looking malevolent and terrifying. A black sword materialized in his hand in an instant, and he swung it maliciously towards the purple-robed man beside her. Lu Junyao had his eyes closed all this while, and he had only slightly lifted his eyelids indifferently when he heard the commotion, thinking nothing of the strike that was quickly flying towards him. Carrying the young lady in his arms, he suddenly disappeared from sight in that instant. By the time that Yufeng could react, he suddenly felt the back of his head crawl, sensing impending danger. Before he could do anything, he suddenly saw everything before him go black, losing consciousness. Chapter 237. 1. Yu suddenly fainted. The tall and well-built purple-robed figure, with a devilishly handsome countenance, was carrying the young lady, who was still groggy from being awoken from sleep. He looked on with an indifferent gaze at the man lying on the ground in an unmoving heap, the murder in his eyes undisguised. His long slender fingers raised up slightly, but were suddenly held down by a smooth and fair-skinned hand. One of Lu Junyao's eyebrows raised up, casting an inquiring look her way. Qingyu then opened her mouth to say, "This person can still be of some use to me alive, and his personality isn't as inflexible as all the other people here. I might be able to gather some useful information out of him as well." "Is that really the case?" Lu Junyao's eyes narrowed. "Isn't it because this fella is rather good-looking, and you can't bear to have him killed by me?" When Qingyu heard that, she almost could not hold herself back, and would have burst out laughing. Seeing the huffed-up expression on the man's face, Qingyu reached her hand out with a smile to pinch that handsome face and said teasingly, "Are you jealous?" "No," Lu Junyao said defensively. "Give me a smile then," Qingyu said as she blinked her eyes, which just earned her a scathingly cold glare as expected. Qingyu lowered her head to laugh quietly, as she reached a hand up to poke the man's face with a finger. "Do you think that you're not as good-looking as that fella lying there on the ground? TSK, me losing out to him?" Lu Junyao scoffed disdainfully, his tone of voice filled with incomparable confidence. As he spoke, his foot even seemed to unconsciously kick Yufeng once in his back. From that unconscious man who was in a coma, a faint groan came to escape through his lips. Qingyu could not help feeling a twitch tug at a corner of her mouth. How hard could he have kicked the guy to cause a person who had lost consciousness to actually feel pain while in a comatose state? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ew, how petty can he be? Alright already. You'd better go as dawn is almost breaking. If anyone were to come here, it will be troublesome for you. Qingyu coaxed in a gentle voice, before she planted a light reassuring peck on the corner of the man's stiffened lips. It must be said that that trick works rather well on Lu Junyao. He tightened the grip of his arms around her to hug the young lady in his arms and said, "I'll come over again tonight. You must remember to be careful in everything you do, as there isn't a single kindly soul in the entire divine temple. Especially with that woman, you must remember that you must not offend her rashly." I know." Qingyu nodded her head meekly. "As for this man..." Lu Junyao's violet eyes narrowed as he glanced over at the person on the ground, and he said in a low deep voice, "Keep your distance from him, and do not interact with him too much. Otherwise, I will not show him any mercy." Chapter 237. 2. You suddenly fainted. Are you even worried that I will fall for him? Qingyu said in exasperated resignation. Isn't this guy too quick to see everyone as competition? Does he lack confidence, so much even with the countenance he possesses? Against anything she could have expected, the man went on to say, "You are so fond of going about on your philandering ways everywhere you go, sparing neither men nor women alike. Moreover, this one is a man here, so my heart cannot be at ease." Qingyu did not know what to say. Hearing those words said, made her feel somewhat awkward. Was she really such a philanderer? After reminding Qingyu to be more careful, the man on the ground was seen to be starting to stir. Lu Junyao did not remain there any longer, and disappeared from sight in an instant, leaving soundlessly like how he had come. Qingyu clicked her tongue, wondering what kind of levels that fella's cultivation could have reached. But to be able to become the reigning lord over one of Cloud Heaven's major powers, and also to be able to freely enter and leave from the divine temple, which was supposedly highly difficult to go into, his cultivation must have reached a level that was almost impossible to attain. She was contemplating deeply when the man on the ground came to stir awake, his eyes befuddled for a moment. Qingyu was worried for a moment that the man would suddenly jump up in rage towards her, but just saw the man climb slowly to his feet, and then crease up his brows as he asked her, "Why am I here?" Qingyu's eyes blinked in confusion. "Don't you remember? What is happening here?" He is actually asking why he is here? Remember what? Yufun's eyes filled up with suspicion. Nothing much. But you came to look for me and I don't know what happened when you fainted all of a sudden. You would not wake up no matter how hard I called out to you. And I was just about to go ask for help. Qingyu managed to react quickly, coming up with an adequate response on the spot. But Yufun was not that easily fooled as his face filled up with suspicion. I fainted all of a sudden? That's right, that's right. Qingyu's face was earnest as she nodded. Why did I suddenly faint? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ew, how would I know? Did you surprise me with an attack? Yufun's gaze grew sharp. Huh, we're in your territory here. How would I dare to try such a trick? I am not seeking my own death here, you know? Qingyu said with a roll of her eyes. Yufun saw nothing suspicious in her reaction, and she was not showing any signs of guilt. Moreover, with his own level of cultivation, it would not be easy for her to spring a surprise attack on him. So he was no longer suspicious. With that outburst from her, Yufun remembered his purpose in coming here. He immediately said in a cold voice, "The temple lord wanted me to bring you to go see her." Chapter 237. 3. You suddenly fainted, what for? Qingyu raised an eyebrow as she looked up at the sky that was still rather dark. It is barely just past the Mao hour. Isn't it a bit too early? I don't need to hear your nonsense. Just go when you're told. Yufun scoffed coldly, and went ahead to turn himself around as he walked off without waiting for her. If she had known, she would not have stopped Lu Junyao from beating this guy here into an idiot. But Yufun, who was walking in front, could not help feeling that there was something wrong with his body. It was only a little while later that he came to think, why was his back hurting so badly? He did not remember being injured on his back at all. But why does it feel like someone had punched him very hard? Yufun brought Qingyu to the main hall they had gone to before, and he immediately departed. It was different from yesterday when she had come. The vast hall did not have a whole bunch of oppressive men in black in there, but just 2 attendants standing outside by the door. She was standing there in the middle of the hall, and had not even said anything when the woman behind the curtain veil called out in a soft, gentle voice, "Have a seat." Qingyu was dazed for a moment before she went to sit down on a chair at the side, and there wasn't a single sound in the hall for a while. Qingyu sat there in awkward silence for a while till she could no longer remain quiet, and wanted to open her mouth to say something when the curtain veil suddenly moved. A pale white hand then stretched out, beautiful and exquisite like fine jade. Qingyu was surprised for a moment. Is she going to? It was said that the Bright Moon Temple's temple lord was highly mysterious, and never revealed her face, even when she met with guests, always veiled behind sheer silk curtains, where only her svelte and slender figure could be seen. Although her countenance had not been seen by people, but since she was hailed as Cloud Heaven's greatest beauty, that she must extremely beautiful looks. So why had she never shown her face to people was an unsolved mystery. Seeing the woman's actions at that moment, Qingyu could not help but think in her heart, is she coming out from behind those curtains? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ew, as she had thought, the woman's hand gently parted the curtains to reveal a corner of her scarlet clothes. Qingyu's heart thumped involuntarily inside. What is this woman thinking of doing? Why is she suddenly coming out from there? Would she then want to kill anyone who comes to see her countenance? Qingyu lowered her eyes as she tried to think up a countermeasure. She could hear the sound of light footsteps coming down 1 step at a time from the raised pedestal. In a blink, the woman was already standing just a few steps away from her. Qingyu looked up reflexively. When she saw the person in front of her, She could not help but be stunned. Chapter 237. 4. You suddenly fainted. The woman in front of her looked to be very young, seeming to be in her early 20s. Her pair of seductive and enchanting narrow eyes seemed to be permanently filled with a hazy and indiscernible smile, the type to mesmerize a person with just one look, an alluring beauty that could make a person lose their soul with a second glance. Even for Qingyu, who had been so used to seeing good-looking people, her eyes could not help but light up upon seeing the person standing before her. But after the initial shock wore off, she thought that something was a little puzzling. The temple lord looked so young, beautiful. So why was she always hiding behind a veil, refusing to let people see her? Compared to the faint and hazy figure she saw far behind the curtains yesterday, Qing Luofei now stood just a close distance away, and Qingyu was able to see her clearly. The same. Looks exactly alike. The woman walked over to her and came to sit down beside Qingyu slowly. Her beautiful hands lifted the superior quality purple sand teapot from the table and poured out a cup of deliciously fragrant tea. Her voice was gentle as she said, "This is tea that you can only find in the divine temple. Have a taste." Qingyu was flustered as she saw the woman pushing the cup of tea with steam billowing over it towards her, and she was unable to react for a moment. She is offering her tea. Should she drink it or not? Seeing Qingyu caught in a helpless daze, Qing Luofei could not help laughing as she purred. "What, you're afraid there's poison?" Qingyu snapped back to her senses when she heard the woman's voice, and she curved her lips up in a smile to say, "Why would I? The temple lord would naturally not do something like that." Upon saying that, Qingyu was already picking up the cup of tea. Truth to be told, she really wasn't afraid that the woman would spike the tea. Not to mention that she was an elixir cultivator herself. Most drugs and poisons would have absolutely no effect on her. And just the fact that she looked so much like her mother would mean that the woman would not be so hasty in doing anything to harm her. Seeing the young lady tasting the tea earnestly, Qing Luofei then showed a sincere smile on her face and asked, "How is it?" "It's great tea. It does not have the bitter taste like most teas, and it carries a uniquely refreshing sweetness as well, which relaxes one's mind," Qingyu said, giving the tea a serious evaluation. "Looks like the young miss here is someone who likes tea as well," Qing Luofei said in satisfaction as she nodded her head. "I merely know a little bit about things here and there, all superficial knowledge. It cannot compare to the temple lord at all," Qingyu said modestly. Qing Luofei's eyes flashed with a glint, like a certain emotion had risen up inside her out of the blue, and had quickly passed. She then opened her mouth to say, "I heard from Yufan that he brought you back from the lower realms. The crimson gold fiery phoenix is the divine temple's symbolic divine beast that disappeared all of a sudden many years ago. The grand priest suddenly detected the divine beast's aura several days ago, and we sent out people down to bring the divine beast back. I wonder if the young miss has seen the divine beast. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You bring it back? Huh. It didn't look that simple at that time." When she first reached the cave, she had seen two of the divine temple's disciples attacking the crimson gold fiery phoenix. It was clear that they had been trying to kill the divine beast and to seize the item that it was guarding. So why is she suddenly changing her tune now? Did this woman think that she is just some ignorant and naive little girl from the lower realms, and was trying to pull a fast one over her head? Chapter 238. 1. Daggers hidden behind a smile. Qingyu scoffed disdainfully in her heart, but her face did not show anything, but just a slightly puzzled look. What kind of a creature is it? The smile on the ends of Qing Luofei's lips stiffened for a moment. You have not seen it before? This lass can really pretend to be a pig and eat a tiger. She was naturally not about to believe that the always loyal Yufan would feed her lies. The crimson gold fiery phoenix's final remnant consciousness had dissipated. For the past several hundred years, it had hidden itself in the lower realms. What could it have been guarding for such a long time? That person is clearly no longer around anymore. The expression on the young lady's face was still steady and calm, not showing the faintest sign of uneasiness. Qing Luofei's eyes darkened as she then started to ask, Does the young miss know what is this place you're in? Bright Moon Divine Temple. Qingyu replied with an arched eyebrow. Since you know what this place is, do you know that when you tell a lie in a place that is so close to the gods, you will be punished by them? Qing Luofei's enchanting eyes narrowed, as she glanced at Qingyu with an indiscernible smile. Qingyu almost wanted to burst out laughing. This woman is rather interesting, isn't she? Has she become so fond of trying to scare her? She has had her fair share of scares growing up. What the temple lord is saying is really frightening. For a nobody like me to come to a place I've heard only in legends for the first time, I am already jittery with fear, afraid that any word or action from me might be inappropriate or wrong. How could I possibly dare to tell a lie? The young lady took a deep breath, her tone of voice filled with puzzlement. Do you really not know? The smile on the ends of Qing Luofei's lips had come to be tinged with a slight iciness, and her attractive and immersive eyes were filled with a chilling cold. It was probably because the young lady before her really looked too much like that person, and also because she was not responding to either patient coaxing or insinuated threats. Qing Luofei suddenly just could not contain the murderous rage that rose inside her in that instant. Her hand raised up and swung right towards the young lady's forehead. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu's expression did not change as she stared straight into the rush of wind blowing towards her. With the palm coming in close, not the slightest ripple showed on her face, but her body secretly tensed up, and her hands under her sleeves held golden needles in their grip, ready to deal with this sudden unexpected turn of events. Just as a blood-filled scene was almost going to happen before her eyes, the woman's palm suddenly halted just an inch before the young lady's face. Just short of that tiny minute distance away, or the young lady's blood would have splattered all over. It was not known why she had suddenly stopped. The two pairs of eyes looked into each other quietly for a long while, when Qing Luofei suddenly laughed softly and moved her hand away from the young lady's head. She then said slowly, "You're quite a bold one, but was born in the lower realms. What a waste." "Is that so?" Qingyu returned the woman's smile. "It must be affinity then, as I have encountered one of the temple lord's subordinates before." Chapter 238. Two daggers hidden behind a smile. Oh. Qing Luofei raised an eyebrow with interest. So how did that come about? I am an elixir cultivator, and I happened to save a very troublesome man by accident. That man was afflicted with voodoo poison, and a rather special kind of curse. Although it took me quite a lot of effort, I was fortunately able to cure him. Qingyu told her story slowly, an unreadable smile on her face, as she looked at the woman before her. As expected, the expression on Qing Luofei's face changed when she heard that, slight shock and disbelief coming to show on it. Qingyu's lips curved up almost unnoticeably as she continued to say, "Then came the time where I was attacked by a mysterious person. It was a woman, but she looked heinously ugly, and her body exuded an evil aura. She said she wanted to kill me as I was the one who caused her to turn into that horrifying state that looked neither human nor ghost. She even claimed to be a grand priestess in cloud heaven, and I did not know at that time. But I understand where she is from now." That woman's manner of dress was exactly like what everyone here in the Divine Temple wears. But isn't the Divine Temple a sacred place blessed by the gods? How could such an evil being appear in a place like this? This is what I really find very puzzling. Upon saying that, the young lady knitted up her brows, her face looking highly confused. At that moment, Qing Luofei's heart surged up in tumult. If what the young lady said is true, then the man she saved would definitely be the overlord of the Dark Lands, Lu Junyao. She had initially wondered how the lower realms was able to produce a person of such great skill, who was able to unravel the curse they had spent so many years to plant into the body of that man. Even the emotion-devouring curse had been dispelled, which was something she had not thought to be possible. But despite what she thought, someone had really done that. For someone to possess such unparalleled skill in healing, they would usually be some reclusive sage, or monstrously old freaks, who had lived for a very long time. But right before her eyes at that moment was instead a flawlessly beautiful young lady, who looked to be only in her teens. and was telling her with a big smile on her face that she was the one who did it. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It all sounded just too incredulous. What is the Temple Lord thinking about? Are you trying to recall if such a person really existed in the Divine Temple? The young lady spoke up with a smile, pulling the woman back from her thoughts. Qing Luofei was pulled back to the present. Long used to never ever revealing her emotions for so many years, she was able to regain her composure very quickly. She then gave a soft laugh and said, "There was indeed such a person here before. But she secretly practiced evil arts and fell into the ways of devilry. I have thrown her out from here, seen as a traitor of the Divine Temple. What she got herself into was not made known to me, and I had not thought that she would actually go down to the lower realms to commit such atrocities. So I see." Qing Yu nodded her head with a look of realization on her face. "That's what I was thinking as well. The Temple Lord does not look like a person who would shield such a sly and treacherous snake, but is a righteous person who is upright and above board." Chapter 238. 3. Daggers hidden behind a smile. The smile on the edge of Qing Luofei's lips stiffened for a second before quickly recovering back to normal. "That is only natural. All right, we've been speaking for so long, and I still don't know what is it that made the Temple Lord ask for me?" Qing Yu pretended that she had not noticed the ugly expression that passed over the woman's face, and went on to ask innocently. Qing Luofei was also thinking of bringing that up, but after getting so riled up by Qing Yu's words earlier, which caused her emotions to fluctuate greatly, she didn't have the chance to bring it up yet. She silently pushed down the displeasure in her heart, and went on to say, "Oh, I was thinking that since you and I share such a great affinity, and the Divine Temple happens to be short of a female attendant, I wanted to tell you that you can choose to stay here if you are willing to. The spirit energy in here is a lot stronger than the lower realms, and it will help you greatly in your cultivation journey. In this world where might made right, no one could possibly not want to get stronger, to allow themselves to hold their own upon this continent." Just as Qing Luofei had expected, after she said those words, the young lady immediately opened her mouth to say with a look of undisguised delight on her face, "Thank you, Temple Lord. I will be most willing, of course." The look she put out was exactly like one greedy for self-vainglory, coveting to reach the peaks of power. She could not help but feel scornful contempt rise up inside. She had thought that the young lady would be the same as that person, but the young lady turned out to be nothing special, and was just like any other mortal. What a waste of that face that looked so much like that person. After a further round of sham polite banter, Qing Yu finally received her orders from Qing Luofei, saying that she could be dismissed. Upon coming out from that place, the expression on Qing Yu's face immediately changed. Her acting skills was really getting better and better. She was almost deceived by what she said herself. But she had succeeded in getting herself to remain in here at least. The long phoenix-like eyes turned solemn. No matter what, she must find out the truth of what happened back then. As the person who should suffer such scorn and contempt from the world should not be her mother. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Back in the Dark Lands. When Bai Zhiyan brought back a pretty good-looking youth, who looked like he had yet to grow wise to the ways of the world, everyone was befuddled for a good while. From which realm had this lost sheep been picked up from this time? Someone went up to make fun of the guy, and he was chased off by a rather annoyed Bai Zhiyan. The youth looked to be about only 14 or 15, with a pair of clear limpid eyes like those of a phoenix, handsome facial features, and a pure and untainted air around him that made people hesitant to defile. That youth was none other than Qing Bei. He was still unable to come around in his own head how he had suddenly come to a strange and foreign place out of the blue. Chapter 238. 4. Daggers hidden behind a smile, but he recognized who Bai Zhiyan was, and he was not worried that the man would do anything to harm him. Though the world that was completely foreign to him, and being surrounded by so many curious and appraising eyes all around made Qing Bei unable to help but open his mouth to ask, "Where is this place?" "Cloud Heaven." Bai Zhiyan glanced at him and replied. Hearing that, Qing Bei was startled a moment, and it took him a while to recover. Is Qingyu here as well? He recalled that Qingyu had told him several days back that she was making a trip into the faint mist's forbidden grounds to investigate a few clues she had gathered about their mother, and she had not yet returned from there ever since. He was starting to become worried that she might have met with some mishap, and was thinking to go look for her in there. Bai Jiyan, who had disappeared for quite a long while, then appeared suddenly and brought him to this place. All this time, the man was no longer a stranger to him because of Qingyu, but he had not interacted with the man all that much either. Hence, he guessed that the reason the man had brought him here must have something to do with Qingyu's disappearance. Although he had always said that he would make his own way here to this place one day, he had not thought that he would come here so suddenly like this, into this place of legend, where super powerful pugilists exist. It was all rather unbelievable. Bai Jiyan was a little surprised by his reaction, but he still nodded smilingly to the youth as he said, "The young lass has indeed been brought here into Cloud Heaven, but she isn't here in the Dark Lands with us." "Where is she then?" When Qingbei heard that Qingyu was brought here by someone else, she would naturally be in a bad situation. So he immediately became worried for her safety. Bai Jiyan shook his head with a laugh. "Rest assured, with Lu Junyao here, nothing will happen to her. We are here in our own territory, and anyone who seeks to make a single move against our people will first have to seek the Dark Land's permission first." Qingbei nimbly captured the most important point within Bai Jiyan's words. "When did Qingyu become one of your people?" Qingbei's brows had creased up, instinctively disliking those words. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Maybe it was because he had been so used to having Qingyu assume a highly important position in his heart, and it felt as if someone was going to take her away from his world at that moment. Bai Jiyan was a man who had already lived more than 200 years, so how could he possibly not have detected the change in the kid's demeanor? Bai Jiyan could not help but laugh and look at Qingbei and say, "The little lass is now inseparable like glue with Lu Junyao. Are you afraid that she will neglect you? Isn't it better now that you have one more person that cares for you as well? I do not need it." Qingbei's voice was gloomy. His eyes turned away to the side as his heart felt rather uncomfortable. The man beside him then went on to say, "I've brought him back here, so I'll make a move now." "Thanks." This was another person's voice, low and magnetic, filled with an allure that was impossible to disregard. Chapter 239. One towards me. She has always been very passionate. Qingbei subconsciously raised his head and saw a tall, well-built figure in a purple robe walking slowly as he approached, with that familiarly devilishly striking countenance, his facial features deep and handsome, and an imperceptible smile hanging from his lips. A beautiful and seductive woman followed right behind him, the expression on her face looking slightly amused. "My lord, this is the little lass' younger brother?" Meiji opened her mouth to ask with a smile. "Looks rather lovable." Lu Junyao cast a cold glance her way. "You'd better not let little monster hear that, or he'll deal with you good and proper." The smile on the edges of Meiji's lips stiffened for an instant, before she said a little sheepishly, "I wouldn't dare say this in front of him. It's not as if I am courting death." "You've got to be joking." With that petty and small-minded personality of her little monster back home, not to mention her praising any male creature, she couldn't even give them a second look if she wanted. Moreover, with the kind of seductive looks she was born with, she really had to behave herself all the time. Lu Junyao snorted disdainfully. "Go do what you have to do. What are you sticking around here for?" Meiji rubbed her nose, feeling a little embarrassed. "Really can't escape the Lord's eyes. He sees right through me. Why are you standing there in a daze? Come on in." Lu Junyao said when he saw the youth standing hesitantly in his spot, and he curved up the ends of his lips to say softly. Qingbei then turned his appraising gaze away, and a look of uneasiness came to show on his handsome-looking face. For some unknown reason, the man Qingyu was so familiar with back when he was always appearing before his eyes before, when seen in another place now, suddenly felt so vastly different, but he just could not put into words what that reason was. Qingbei followed behind the man without a word, and saw quite a number of people in similar dress, who looked like the man's subordinates along the way. Every single one of them bowed and greeted him respectfully, showing complete deference and worship towards the man before them. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Qingbei witnessed all this with his own eyes, and he started to think just what kind of an identity did this man possess. Unknowingly, Qingbei had been brought to a place that was completely different from the vast and majestic architecture that had been filled with darkness they had been surrounded by before. It was like an independent world that stood isolated from everything else around, with a beautiful rocks and a pristine waters, an elegant pavilion sitting right in the middle of the water. Walking across a long stone arching bridge, there was a good adequately sized courtyard. Many unknown flowers and foliage were planted outside in the courtyard, and a stone tables with stone chairs sat in a corner to provide people with a resting corner. The entire place warm and comfortable looking. The thing that surprised Qingbei was not the fact that he was able to see a place like this in cloud heaven, but it was because he found everything before his eyes was extremely familiar to him. Chapter 239. 2. Towards me. She has always been very passionate. The quaint little courtyard was actually an exact replica of the tranquil abode he had lived in back at the Eternal Peace Duke's manor. Even the foliage around the courtyard were very much like the plants Qingyu had planted in leisure back in the past. It had almost been a year since they had left to go to the Faint Mist sect, and they had not gone back since. Upon seeing the place now, Qingbei realized that he actually missed the place quite a bit. This is... Qingbei looked at the man beside him in surprise. Why would he build a place that was exactly the same as the tranquil abode here? Lu Junyao laughed and said, "You will be staying here from now on." Why? Qingbei did not feel any delight in his heart, but went on to knit his brows together to say, "You got your people to bring me all the way here to Cloud Heaven just to tell me this? I just want to know where Qingyu is." "Of course I did not bring you here just to tell you this." Lu Junyao lowered his gaze to look at the youth. "You do not have to worry about Qingyu. I will naturally protect my people, and you will just have to ensure your own well-being." He had just heard what he did not like to hear again. Qingbei's face darkened for a moment before he said slowly, "When did Qingyu become one of your people? Aren't you just helping us to find our mother? Aren't you just one of mother's friends? Does that really matter?" Lu Junyao raised an eyebrow, feeling rather amused. This kid seems to have some veiled meaning behind his words. Since you're a friend of our mother's, that means that you should be quite advanced in age already, and basing on the lifespans of people in Cloud Heaven, you would be a few hundred years old at least. Qingbei said all that without any expression on his face, except for a slight gritting of his teeth right at the very end. "You're making a move on your friend's daughter, and being so much older than her. Don't you feel guilty about it at all?" Hearing those words, Lu Junyao was highly tickled. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It was a while before he laughed softly and spoke. "Who said that one cannot fall for a friend's daughter? Moreover, you know that the lifespans of people in Cloud Heaven are very long, where some even live thousands of years. People my age here are no different from men in their 20s where you are from, so there is no problem with our ages here." Qingbei was not prepared to accept that. To think that the future brother-in-law he had imagined many times before might turn out to be this man. Even if that is the case, that does not mean that Qingyu would like you in return. Qingbei said angrily, "She is strong-headed and stubborn, and if you try to force her to be with you, she will never ever submit." That was how he comforted himself in his heart, thinking that it was all just the man's one-sided wishful thinking. But the action the man took in the next moment made him feel as if he had been struck by lightning. Upon hearing his words, Lu Junyao first smiled through stiff lips pressed tightly together, before he innocuously tugged at the collar of his clothes to reveal his neck a little bit more. Chapter 239. 3. Towards me. She has always been very passionate. Qingbei had initially been puzzled by what the man was doing, but after the man pulled his collar, and it came loose, a faint red mark could be seen on that fair white neck. Upon a closer look, Qingbei then saw that it looked like teeth marks. Before Qingbei could even react, Lu Junyao's deep voice sounded a little hoarsely. You do not have to worry about that. Towards me, she has always been very passionate. Those teeth marks were from last night's escapade, when he was bitten by the young lady in punishment. Although she had not bitten him all that hard, but it had been enough to leave a mark, and it had turned into a sensual-looking blot on his neck. Qing Bei felt his eyes sting as he stared, his face turning white with anger, and it was a long while before he was able to calm himself. He had not thought that Qing Yu had grown to become so intimate with this man. But his anger had not overtaken his concern for Qing Yu's personal safety. He had not forgotten what Bai Jiyan had said earlier, that Qing Yu was not here with them. He could not help but open his mouth to ask, "Where is Qing Yu right now? I want to go see her." "You can't do that right now," Lu Junyao said as he readjusted his collar slowly. "Why? She is in the Bright Moon Temple, and that isn't a place that anyone can gain entry into." Lu Junyao had paused for a moment before deciding to tell him. Bright Moon Temple. Qing Bei fell silent, and did not say anything else. He knew that Lu Junyao was not lying to him about that place. He would not be able to go into that place unless someone from the Bright Moon Temple were to bring him in. Seeming to have sensed the youth's disappointment, Lu Junyao patted the youth reassuringly on his shoulder. "There is no need to look so discouraged. I will tell her that you've come to Cloud Heaven, so that she can set her mind at ease. You should not be worrying about anything else right now. The most important thing now is to focus on raising your cultivation level." I know. Qing Bei had naturally been able to sense that the spirit energy here was more abundant here than in the constellation continent, and that practicing his cultivation here will increase his progress by several folds, speeding his advancement. Lu Junyao nodded his head. "Be at ease and stay here for a period. When the time comes, I will then send you to where your father is." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. These were rather troubled times, and it wasn't safe for the kid here. Only in the barbarian tribe's territories, who had secluded themselves from the world for many years, would he be safest. The moment those words came out of his mouth, Qing Bei was completely stunned. His good-looking phoenix-like eyes stared, and it took him a while before he regained his senses. "What did you just say?" If he had not been mistaken, did the man just say that he will send him to where his father is? Lu Junyao raised an eyebrow when he saw how shocked the youth was. It then dawned upon him after a while that he seemed to have only told the little fox about that, and had not informed the kid at all. No wonder he reacted like this. Chapter 239. For towards me. She has always been very passionate. He paused for a moment, before saying with a nod, That's right. Your father. He is chieftain of the barbarian tribe, and you will meet him in time to come. You do not have to be nervous about it." Not get nervous? How could he possibly not get nervous? Without knowing anything in advance, such a crushingly heavy piece of news was thrown right onto him so suddenly. He had not even had time to digest the news that his mother was still alive, yet when he was suddenly told where his father is, it was a little too much for his little heart to take. Seeming to have sensed the menacing anger rising up in the youth, Lu Junyao shrugged his shoulders in helplessness as he said, "I had thought that the little lass would have told you. But it seems like she did not want you to be too worried, and did not want to make you feel so much pressure." Qing Bei's stiff lips were pressed tightly together, and he did not respond. And he knew that all too well. Qing Yu had never shown her weak and frail side to people before. Even when they came to know that their parents were not dead, she had not shown the slightest helplessness, or a single moment of being lost, but had just said reassuringly to him, "Little Bei, I will definitely find you your family and bring you to them." That's right. His family. She had always been very clear about it. She isn't the real Qing Yu, and she isn't from this world. The day will come where she will leave. But she had probably never noticed it herself, that she had become more and more immersed into her character, to really become Qing Yu in this world, his elder sister. He was also incredibly grateful for that fire back then, that allowed Qing Yu to be resurrected with a completely different soul, that was so powerful and shone with new brilliance. The barbarian tribe. You're really not going to stay? Yen Shu's face that had been highly weathered by time was looking stern, and forbidding as usual. Mo Jingyu seemed like he wasn't very used to seeing him look so serious, and he punched the man lightly on the shoulder as he said with a laugh, "Why the long face? It's not as if we're parting in death. What are you going to do?" Yen Shu asked with his eyes narrowed, not allowing the man to change the subject by trying to laugh it off. Mo Jingyu sighed in helplessness. "I knew that I would not be able to hide it from you. I really have something that I must do this time." "Is it that thing from before?" Yen Shu creased his brows and asked. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Mo Jingyu laughed coldly, and a malevolent glint came over his black jade eyes. "Never had anyone been able to plot against me, and still remain safe and sound. Even when it's a woman, I will not show any mercy. If your mind is set on it, then go do what you have to," Yen Shu said as he turned around, his foot raised as he walked away slowly. "I only hope that you do not come back wounded and injured. When did I become so useless in your eyes?" Mo Jingyu queried as he gazed upon the man's back, looking at the hair on his head that had turned half gray, though they were of the same age. A glint flashed fleetingly in his eyes for an instant, but disappeared immediately. "Yen Shu, my life does not belong to me alone anymore, and I will not let myself fall back into the same state I was in before. That will be the best." Chapter 240. 1. A familiar scent. When Mo Jingyu went to look for his wife, he was surprised to see that there was a little girl in her room as well. Feeling a little puzzled, he remained standing outside the door and did not go in. "Big Sister Fei, can you not go? Little you can't bear to see you leave." The soft puerile voice of the little girl gushed with great reluctance. Mo Jingyu arched up an eyebrow. When did Fei Er become acquainted with such a young little girl in the barbarian tribe? Inside the room, Qinglan Fei looked at the little girl leaning on her arm, and her beautiful face smiled a little helplessly. I can't bear to leave you too, but I have something very important that I need to go deal with. I promise that I'll come back to visit, all right? Can't you bring Ayu with you?" the little girl asked in a pleading voice. The moment those words came out, Qinglan Fei then realized something, and she raised an eyebrow up slightly. "Ayu, tell me honestly, are you thinking of sneaking out to play behind your grandfather's back?" The young girl's pretty face looked a little embarrassed for a moment before her lips pouted sadly to say in a soft voice, "That isn't true at all." Qinglan Fei had seen through what the little girl was thinking immediately, and although she liked the little girl very much, she was not going to be fooled by her so easily. She then said in a tender voice filled with concern, "You are still very young and the world outside is filled with dangers that you cannot even begin to imagine. You will have to wait till you have become very strong and possess the ability to protect yourself before you can step out into the world." Ayu did not fully understand it, but she still nodded her head obediently. "I'll listen to Big Sister Fei. Then, will you really come back here in future?" "Of course I will." Qinglan Fei nodded her head and smiled. Ayu's large limpid eyes then lit up with delight as she hugged Qinglan Fei's waist, looking like an adorable little kitten. Seeing that, Mo Jingyu coughed lightly, and then came in through the door. When Ayu saw the man she had never seen before come in, she jumped up in shock. But when she took a closer look at him, she seemed to feel that she had seen that man before somewhere. She blinked her eyes a few times. A good while passed before she finally came to recall, and she started to stutter in disbelief. Aren't you from the Forbidden Chambers? That pretty boy that the chieftain has been secretly keeping as a mistress?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU secretly keeping as a mistress? Pretty boy? Upon hearing that, Mo Jingyu's face immediately turned dark while Qinglan Fei could not help but burst out into peals of uncontrollable laughter. "This little girl really says the darndest things. Can you really use the term mistress on a man like this?" But as Yen Shu was already looking like a wizened middle-aged uncle, while Mo Jingyu was young and handsome compared to him, it could really look like that if one let his thoughts run wild. Chapter 240. 2. A familiar scent, and Qinglan Fei was mischievously amused by that thought. Seeing the man's dark gloomy face, Ayu was not intimidated, but was instead looking uncomprehendingly at him with her head tilted to one side. Am I mistaken? You are clearly the man lying inside the forbidden chambers. When I tailed the chieftain in the past, I saw that he often went to see you secretly, and said many things to you. He even said that he missed you. Mo Jingyu's face could not be described with the word dark and gloomy anymore, as it had turned so dark that it looked like ink was going drip down. Qing Lanfei kept her head lowered at the side, fighting very hard to contain the laughter that was threatening to burst out. However, her shoulders that were shaking uncontrollably betrayed the gloating glee she was feeling inside right at that moment. You cannot really blame her, as picturing Yen Shu and Mo Jingyu together in such a warm and harmonious scene was such a sight that she could not help being tickled by it. Mo Jingyu glared indignantly at the little girl's innocent face before he reached out and pulled Qing Lanfei to him. He then complained in a grumbling tone, "Even you are making fun of me as well." Qing Lanfei immediately restrained the wide smile on her face and shook her head as she said, "I wasn't making fun of you. I just think that Yen Shu really treats you rather well. He is like a brother, of course he treats me well." How could Mo Jingyu possibly not know what she was really thinking? But he just did not want to expose her. He glanced at the little girl at the side and said, "Let's go then. I've already bid goodbye to Yen Shu." All right. Bright Moon Temple. After the confrontation that day, Qing Luofei did not get anyone to come summon Qing Yu again. It wasn't just because of that cool countenance that looked so much like a certain someone, but it was also due to the fact that Qing Yu wasn't like any other normal little lass. She looked like someone that would be easy to bully, but was actually a person capable of pretending to be a pig to eat up a tiger. Since there was still some remaining doubt, Qing Luofei decided to keep her around while she unravels the mystery in her heart. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Qing, as an attendant, you're not doing your duty, but just hides here in idleness. Do you think it appropriate? A familiar cold voice called out angrily, waking the groggy Qing Yu up from slumber. She yawned lazily and her eyes were still a little dazed as she said in a slightly raspy voice still heavy with sleep, "What happened?" That fella Lu Junyao had come and kept her awake for a greater part of the night. He never failed to take liberties with her every time he came over, using the convenient excuse that he wanted to make sure that she had not been bullied or hurt anywhere, which was highly taxing on her both in mind and body. She was just barely able to get some rest after he left, but before light had even broken over the horizon, this man had come to disturb her sleep. How infuriating. Chapter 243. A familiar scent. The young lady with exquisite facial features lay on the bed of soft clouds with her long hair spread a little messily over it. Her phoenix-like eyes were half open, still a little misty from being awakened from her slumber, looking exceptionally beautiful and lovable. And that heart-stirring raspy voice, having just been roused up from sleep, would really be irresistible to any man. What's more, for these young hot-blooded men in the divine temple, who had practiced abstinence for hundreds of years. The moment Yufan heard the young lady's voice, he immediately froze in place, and when he saw that languid and alluring figure, his entire body immediately felt as if there was something wrong, unable to take his eyes off her. He stood there in a daze as he stared at that groggy-looking young lady, unable to recover his senses for a good long while. When Qing Yu finally came awake from her groggy daze and saw the man standing dumbly in front of her, she arched up an eyebrow and asked, "What is it? What did you just say?" When she asked that, Yufan seemed like he was shocked awake, where he immediately did an about turn to leave, without saying a single word. Qing Yu was left there dumbfounded in befuddlement. What was that all about? A corner of Qing Yu's lips twitched in speechlessness, making her feel that everyone in that place were all strange and eccentric. She had initially been feeling rather sleepy, and after being awoken in shock like that, she decided she was not going back to sleep anymore. She then got up and slowly walked out from the place. There were still a few flickering stars hanging under the still dark sky. Qing Yu was entranced for a moment, staring into that starry sky. For some unknown reason, she had actually felt as if she was able to understand something among them. Before she knew it, she raised her foot and started walking in a particular direction. By the time she realized it, she found that she was already in a place she did not know at all. The Bright Moon Divine Temple's grounds were filled with many strangely shaped palaces and fortresses of all sorts, some big, some small, all over the place, making the place feel like a gigantic maze. Unless one was familiar with the topography of the area, one would surely become lost in there. And that was exactly the case for Qingyu right at that moment. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. She came to discover in sorrow that she seemed to be lost. So how was she going to find her way back? If she was discovered by anyone, they might think that she was trying to escape. Just as she was feeling depressed about the situation, the sounds of a slight commotion reached her from a short distance away. Qingyu raised her eyes up in surprise and saw a place that was stood out like a sore thumb against every other place in the Bright Moon Temple grounds. Like it had been scorched by a huge fire, it was falling apart in many places. The jade pillars and beams lay in a pile, crisscrossing over each other, like it had been abandoned and left in ruins for many years, till it was impossible to tell what it looked like originally. Chapter 240. For a familiar scent. What is this place? She was still feeling puzzled when she heard the same sound again. Driven by curiosity, she began walking slowly towards that worn and dilapidated palatial-looking building. But before she had even gotten close to it, a shadow suddenly appeared before her eyes, standing with her back facing her. His voice was a little dark and sinister as he said, "Entry to the place is prohibited." Qingyu was surprised for a moment before she came to say with a laugh, "My apologies. It was unintentional. I stumbled my way here by accident, and I do not know my way back. May I ask if you can point me in the right direction?" The shadow did not give her any response, but seeing that Qingyu did not seem to harbor any bad intentions, he then relaxed his guard. Although Qingyu thought that this was rather strange, she was however not too familiar with this place. So she did not give it much further thought, and just turned herself around, deciding to leave. But without knowing how, her hand was suddenly pricked by a sharp object beside her, and blood immediately began to drip down. At that same moment, a golden red star suddenly flashed brightly across the dusky dim sky, disappearing in the very next instant. It happened so quickly that one would think that they had just imagined it. Although the flash of light had passed really quickly, a couple of people still managed to catch that strange phenomenon. One of those people was the leader of the Bright Moon Temple's Grand Priests, Song Jian, and the other one. Qingyu's brows were creased up as she looked at the wound on the back of her hand. A gust of wind suddenly blew the doors of the palace in front wide open, and a woman in an orange dress came walking out slowly from within. Long jet black hair draped the back of her shoulders, over a very skinny frame, making her look like a floating wraith as she glided her way over right before Qingyu. Qingyu blinked her eyes in surprise as she stared at the person in front of her. The two large limpid black eyes upon the sharp pointed oval face made her look even more pitifully frail, seemingly younger than Qingyu in age. But when she opened her mouth, it was a woman's voice that sounded highly familiar, sounding a little ill at ease. "Can I take a look at your wound?" Qingyu was taken aback a moment, unable to react to her words. But in the very next second, she found that her hand was held within the woman's grasp. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. There was no temperature from the woman's touch, the icy chill almost seeping right into her bones. But that was not the thing that surprised her the most. The woman held her hand and slowly leaned in closer, before she placed her lips over where she had been hurt, murmuring softly, "This is the princess scent." The place where her lips touched then began to give out a faint gentle glow, and the wound healed in an instant to its originally unblemished state, leaving not a single trace of a scar or faintest mark. Qingyu's eyes widened in surprise, and she instinctively pulled her hand back to inspect it carefully. She discovered that her hand had healed completely without the slightest blemish, and she was just about to open her mouth to offer her thanks, when she saw that the woman had broken into a warm smile. That pair of large black eyes were misty as she said, "You finally come back." Chapter 241. 1. Secret Massacre. You finally come back. Hearing those rather strange words, Qingyu looked at her in puzzlement before she started to say softly, "Have you mistaken me for someone else?" The woman shook her head lightly. "The princess sent is one that I will never ever forget no matter how many years have passed." After she finished saying that, she lifted her eyes up once again. A highly expectant and hopeful look filled her eyes bit by bit. "I just knew that the princess would definitely return. No matter how long a time has passed, you are still the lord and master of this place, and no one can ever replace you." The woman's voice wavered and sounded almost indiscernible for a moment. The black shadow that had stopped Qingyu earlier immediately moved in a quick flash to catch the woman, before he asked with great concern, "Grand Priestess, are you all right?" "I'm fine." The woman waved off the black shadow and said dismissively. Qingyu was stunned for a moment when she heard their conversation. Grand Priestess? This woman that was acting so strangely and lived in such a broken and dilapidated palace is actually a Grand Priestess? Based on her knowledge, a Grand Priestess in the Bright Moon Temple was a very high position, far more senior than all their disciples, and was someone who held the greatest authority, second to only the temple lord and its elders. She had never seen a Grand Priestess that looked as decrepit as this woman before her. Had she committed some grave mistake and got herself exiled to a place like this? "Princess, come with me." The aura from the blood you spilled just now would have alerted those guys at the Divine Temple. With noses as sharp as hounds, they should be making their way here very soon. You should go hide away for a while. Without even waiting for Qingyu to open her mouth to clear her doubts, the woman had already turned around and was going back into the palace. Her footsteps seemed a little floaty and light, as the black shadow followed worriedly just beside her. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Seeing that, Qingyu quickly followed them inside. The moment she set foot into the palace, the old and tattered main doors gave a loud creak and slammed themselves shut. Qingyu could not help but raise her eyebrows. What is going to happen? And the orange-clothed figure with long hair splayed over her back immediately fell to the ground the moment she stepped into the palace, her strength giving out. The black shadow quickly helped her over to a lounge chair at the side and called out in a deep voice, "Grand Priestess, just drink some of your subordinate's blood. If you continue on like this, your body will not be able to last much longer, and your soul will disperse and disappear into the wind. Then the long years you spent waiting here would have been in vain." After saying that, the black shadow summoned up his spirit energy and transformed it into a dagger. He was just about to draw it across his forearm, but before he could even make his move, the dagger was suddenly sent flying through the air with a flick of the woman's sleeve. "I do not need you to make my decisions for me. Even if I were to die, I will never ever use such unorthodox and evil to extend my life, but will choose to struggle right at death's door." The woman's breath sounded rather weak, her face white as a sheet. But even then, needing to pause between each word, her voice was resolute as she uttered those words. Chapter 241. 2. Secret Massacre. Grand Priestess. No need to say any more. My mind is set. The woman opened her mouth to speak, interrupting the black shadow. "You're dismissed." Even if Qingyu was really that dense, she would have discovered that there was something wrong with the woman by now. She could not help but go on to ask, "You are a spirit?" From the moment the woman appeared, Qingyu had felt that the woman gave her a very strange feeling, but she had not thought of this point. Her aura was very weak at that moment, and her body was beginning to turn a little translucent, like she was going to disappear at any moment. But she had clearly been able to touch the woman's body earlier. Although her body had felt rather cold, she had definitely felt firm and solid flesh. So what is happening here? Hearing that, the woman slowly lifted her head, and the pair of dark obsidian eyes seemed to recall things in the far past by looking at her. After a long while, she then opened her mouth to say softly, "I am not a spirit. It's a curse." "A curse?" Qingyu's eyes widened in surprise. "What do you mean?" The woman suddenly laughed softly as she raised up a translucent hand. and it was impossible to tell whether the expression on her face was one of joy or sadness. That's right. I have remained here in this place for several hundred years, wrecked by the power of the curse, suffering excruciating pain and agony, but will never die, living day after day, and not knowing when I can finally be freed from this torment. Qingyu immediately thought of something. It's the Temple Lord from the Divine Temple? Although she had not interacted with the Temple Lord all that much, but Qingyu already knew that the Temple Lord was not someone who was easy to get along with, not to mention all the rumors she had heard of the vile and treacherous deeds the venomous Temple Lord had committed. Once Qingyu's words came out, the woman suddenly laughed chillingly, and her voice was frosty as she said, "Temple Lord? Ha! She is nothing more than an absolutely ruthless maniac who massacred an entire bloodline. A dove usurping the magpie's nest." Qingyu arched up an eyebrow. From that tone, it seems like she knows something. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Grand Priestess, trouble is upon us. There are many people gathered outside. While they spoke, the black shadow that the woman had dismissed earlier appeared once again, his voice a little frantic. The woman cast a scathing glance over the man, and it seemed to be filled with an invisible oppressive aura, as the panic in the black shadow's heart immediately disappeared without a single trace left. "What's gotten you into such a fluster?" the indifferent voice then said, its tone completely monotonous. The black shadow took a deep breath before saying slowly, "Forgive me, Grand Priestess, but it was just too sudden." The person leading the people is Zhang Jian. The expression on the woman's face finally showed a ripple of emotion, as a strangely chilling smile slowly blossomed at the edges of her lips. To think he still dares to show himself here. Chapter 241. 3. Secret Massacre. After saying that, she then told the Black Shadow, "Bring the princess to hide in the secret tunnel first. Without my orders, do not come out. Grand Priestess, with your current power, you will not be able to stand against Zhang Jian." The Black Shadow had not even finished his sentence when the rest of his words were drowned out by the woman's eyes that had turned to become red as blood in an instant. Her lips parted to spit out just one curt word. "Go." The Black Shadow did not say anything to argue further, but just lowered his head to say, "Yes." He then turned around to bow respectfully before Qingyu. "Princess, please come with your subordinate." At almost the same instant they just stepped into the secret tunnel, the palace's already shaky and vulnerable main doors were suddenly viciously thrown wide open by a violent force from outside. Outside the door, the tall figure of a man with extraordinarily handsome looks stood in the lead, wearing deep blue priest robes, looking exceptionally eye-catching against the others beside him who were dressed in black or white robes, as he stood with a faint smile on the corner of his lips. In contrast to the large horde of aggressive-looking men outside the door, the lone thin and frail-looking woman, with a refined-looking countenance, standing within looked so weak and helpless. But one would be unable to find the slightest sliver of panic or helplessness on the woman, the indifferent expression on her face unchanged from beginning to end. In that thin skinny figure, it felt as if the woman's body had boundless power, making it impossible to underestimate her. When Zhang Jian saw the woman inside the palace, his expression was startled for a moment, like he had seen someone he had not met for a very long time, or that he was looking at a person who should not exist in this world, but had suddenly appeared before his eyes, which shocked or surprised him. The person before his eyes was someone he was familiar with. Many years ago, within the icy cold Divine Temple, this person was the only bit of color in this place. He slowly came to move his lips, opening his mouth to speak in disbelief. "Qingyu." The woman's slightly lowered eyelids moved ever so slightly, before she slowly raised her head to look up. The deep black darkness in those eyes stirred the man's heart, and her voice had a slight raspiness as she said, "Grand Priest Zhang Jian, I trust you've been well." Those words that could not have been any more ordinary, however, caused Zhang Jian's eyes to narrow. It was after a good while before he opened his mouth to say very slowly, "Qingyu, you've always addressed me as senior. Why are you being so distant?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. "EU Senior." The woman slowly repeated the word, and then paused before she laughed. Could Grand Priest Song Jian be mistaken somewhere? My fellow senior, the man called Yin Lu, a kind-hearted person who abhorred evil with a vengeance? Didn't he die in that brutal and ruthless massacre that happened many years back? Song Jian's heart suddenly wrenched up painfully. Yin Lu. It was a name that he had not heard for so many years. Chapter 241. 4. Secret Massacre. It sounded so foreign, but also so familiar to him at the same time. Chiyu. Don't call out my name. You're not worthy. Seeing her so resolutely cold, Song Jian's hands could not help but clench up tightly under his sleeves. Seemingly after an intense struggle, he finally came to blow out one long breath, before calling out sharply in a deep voice. Search, what do you think you're doing? Chiyu's eyes darkened, her complexion turning an ugly shade. It's not enough that you've become someone's lackey for so many years. Are you going to shatter this last sliver of tranquility of mine as well? Song Jian lowered his gaze, like he did not want to see the hatred and disappointment in the woman's eyes. Chiyu, you have been very intelligent since you were very young, and have been good at reading the situation and looking into people's hearts. You knew how to elicit people's sympathy and pick on their soft spots to cover up things that you wish to hide and do not want people to find out. But have you forgotten? In this world, you are indeed the person who understands me the most, but I am also the one that knows you best. Song Jian walked towards the woman, approaching a step at a time. Under the flickering candlelight, the tall towering figure looked as though it was going to swallow up the thin figure completely. But so many years have passed and I have changed while you have not changed in the slightest. Song Jian slowly finished his words, before his gaze suddenly stared with a cold glint towards a particular spot. That spot was the secret tunnel that Chiyu had asked the Black Shadow to bring Qingyu to hide in. Chiyu, I wonder if you saw that phenomenon in the sky earlier? Both you and I are the most outstanding ones in the line of priests, and only our eyes would be able to capture that kind of a strange phenomenon. Song Jing laughed softly as he looked at the woman's pretty and exquisite countenance, when the face that was always calm and confident actually came to show a flash of panic for a brief instant. That omen was tinged with our god's aura, so that means that the destined one has appeared, isn't it? Song Jing walked past the woman's pale shocked countenance, making his way towards the location of the hidden secret tunnel, the expression on his face turning malevolent. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Why are you putting up such a futile struggle? The Bright Moon Temple would never tolerate such heretics, who will find that there is no escape, but only death in the end. With a cold shout from Song Jian, the deep blue priest robes moved to draw a graceful arc under the night sky, and the wide voluminous sleeves billowed up with a powerful gust of wind, carrying such terrifying force that it seemed like it would obliterate the entire palace into nothing if the wind struck it. No, Chiyu's eyes were wide as she stared, a broken cry tearing out from her throat, filled with so much sadness and hopelessness. No, that's her princess. Chapter 242. 1. Had he seen a ghost? However, the thing that everyone expected to see did not happen. After the powerfully turbulent hurricane passed, what came to be revealed before everyone's eyes was a tattered wall, its original look wrecked beyond recognition. Not to mention people, even the secret tunnel hidden behind it was not revealed. Song Jian stared incredulously in disbelief. How is that possible? There's nothing. He had clearly detected an unusual aura hidden behind that spot. How did it suddenly disappear? Similarly caught in a shocked daze was Chiyu, but besides a sharp shrinking of the irises within her eyes, she did not show much of a change in emotion on her face. Her fingernails that were digging into her palms slightly relaxed a little, and she came to discover that her tightly clenched fists were covered in cold sweat from fear. Is everything fine now? The princess isn't in there. Does that mean she is safe now? By the time Song Jian turned to look, not a single ripple of emotion could be seen on Chiyu's face anymore, turned into a cold indifferent mask like she did not know anything. The expression on her face had clearly been panicked earlier, and had even been tinged with a sliver of fearful trepidation. So Songjian was not going to let himself be fooled by her so easily. The corners of his lips split into an arc of indiscernible meaning. Qiyu, did you do something? My senses have never been wrong, and I detected more than one spirit aura within this palace. Where is the person who carries the bloodline of the god? What nonsense are you spouting? Qiyu scoffed coldly with a laugh. That venomous woman laid a curse on me, and my cultivation was completely destroyed, turning me into someone who is neither human nor ghost, who can do nothing but wait here slowly for my life to wither away till my last dying breath leaves this body. What do you suppose that I am capable of doing in my current state? As expected, the moment that person was mentioned, the expression on Song Jian's face immediately changed. His handsome face flashed with displeasure for a moment. I will not allow you to besmirch the Temple Lord's name. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Iyuha, Temple Lord. Qiyu laughed loudly. That animal who is devoid of humanity is fit to be the Temple Lord. Besides that pretty face she maintains through evil techniques, what does she possess that is worth having you do her bidding, even at the expense of you violating the vows you made when you chose to take up the position of a priest? I've said that I will not allow you to slander the Temple Lord. Song Jian's eyes flashed with a dark glint, and his body moved speedily to come right before Qiyu in an instant, before grabbing Qiyu viciously by the neck. Qiyu's lips curled up further in a scornful smile. Although she was already finding it hard to breathe, and was pacing right before death's door, there was absolutely no fear showing on her face. Kill me if you can. Song Jian's voice was malevolent as he replied. You think I do not dare to? But at the very moment murderous intent rose up in his heart, a powerful oppression suddenly surged towards him, giving him no choice but to release his grip and take several steps back in retreat. Chapter 242. 2. Had he seen a ghost? Shock showed on his face, and he raised his voice to shout. Who is playing these tricks while hiding? Show yourself to me. As soon as his voice fell, that strange power then lifted his entire body up into the air, before tossing him viciously out of the place. The palace's main doors then shut tightly with a boom right after, where they stood impenetrable, and still no matter how the people outside tried to force their way in, fantastically strange. What just happened here? Song Jian came to his feet as his subordinates helped him up. His face was deathly pale, as he vomited out a mouthful of blood. Grand Priest, the doors cannot be opened. After two black-robed men found that their powerful strikes on the door had absolutely no effect, they immediately went to Song Jian to report it. Song Jian wiped the trickle of blood from the corner of his mouth and stared at the tightly shut doors into the palace, suspicion rising up in his eyes. Just who could possibly possess the ability to do this, and was even able to injure him? Although his cultivation was in the study of priesthood, but his powers was great enough for him to hold his own in cloud heaven, and to achieve such a high position in the divine temple. Although his powers could not be said to be unparalleled, but it was considered to be of a superior level. If it was really the destined one who inherited the god's bloodline, Song Jian narrowed his eyes. Forget it. He must investigate this clearly before he reports it to the Temple Lord. We retreat for now. Inside the palace, after Song Jian was tossed out of the place, the shaky and badly battered wall suddenly collapsed, where there was nothing to be seen before. When the entire secret tunnel was revealed before their eyes, Qing Yu and the Black Shadow came walking slowly out from within. Qiyu was a little stunned. Princess, just now. What could have happened? How did the secret tunnel disappear? That was just too unbelievable. Seeing the shock that was showing in that pair of large eyes, Qing Yu went on to explain calmly. That was nothing. As the secret tunnel wasn't that large an area, I was able to keep it away very quickly. That man would not have noticed anything strange just now. Those words spoken so matter-of-factly however stunned Qiyu further into a speechless daze for a very long while. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You keep it away? Did she just hear those words correctly? How do you keep something like a secret tunnel away? And that secret tunnel was at least several hundred meters long. able to allow more than 10 men to walk abreast in there. She actually said that it wasn't that large an area. Xingyu arched up an eyebrow as she looked at the astounded look on the woman's face like she had just seen a ghost. Although she did not really understand it, she went on to open her mouth to ask. People from Cloud Heaven would not find a simple technique like this unfamiliar, would you? It's called spatial time shift. I had merely shifted the tunnel to another place just now and set up an illusion in its place. No matter how high one's level of cultivation is, they would not be able to see through it. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.